a girl serenading a boy who, who she has a crush on. And I was thinking about that idea, and then I just had really good feelings about it. I love jazz, and I just had never seen any films like, an Asian American girl, you know, getting what she wants, but not like the way like Western feminists would do, but doing it her own way, from her roots. And I had never seen it, so I wanted to make that, and also, yeah. So that's how I sort of came up with the idea, and it is a process of, um, like my own, discovery and my own process of finding this feminism.
For our team,
and if you would introduce
sure.
yourself.
I'm Andrew Osborne, the co-director for Daddy Don't Go. This is Suzette Burton, our co-producer. And for us, my co-director and I, Emily was a social worker before becoming a filmmaker, and so for her, she saw a lot of these stories over and over again. And her first film, she worked very hard on telling the story of 4 women trying to transition from welfare to work. But she saw dads and men in those stories that sort of defied this deadbeat dad stereotype that we hear so often. And for us, we wanted to challenge, I think, that stereotype and tell a different side of the story, and show that, I think for these guys particularly, you can tell the story is much deeper than just a decision to stay or to leave. And I think despite all those challenges that these guys went through, for them, they wanted to choose to stay. And we all have personal reasons why we wanted to make this film. I'm a Korean American adoptee, and my dad put a camera in my hand when I was really young and encouraged me to be a filmmaker and enabled me to do that. And I'll let Suzette speak to her story, but we all had a personal reason why we wanted to tell this particular story. So.
Well, I got involved in the project. I did a project for their company, and then I spoke to the director, and she asked me about like my life story. She saw a documentary I did about my father, and she started asking me about what I've been through. And basically, I was raised. I was taken away from my mom, taken away from my dad. Well, taken away from my mom. My mom was on drugs, my dad was on drugs. I used to live in the foster care system. So the reason why I got involved in this film is because, I really don't want to see kids go through what I've been through in my life. So it's important for me to make steps to make that change. And since I'm already a filmmaker, I feel like that's a great idea. So that's the reason why I thought it was really important for me to get involved in the film.
Just a quick question for you guys. How did you go about getting your subjects?
We worked with several organizations in New York. One in particular, the Bronx Defenders in the Bronx, did an amazing job of talking with a lot of their cases and a lot of the dads involved in both criminal and family court cases. And so 3 of the dads, Nelson, Omar, and Alex, were subjects that we found through them. And Roy was actually a friend of Alex's from the mechanics school. And so we wanted to tell Roy, particularly, you see he's much, better off than the other dads. But I think his problems itself are much more complicated and complex in a lot of of ways. And so we wanted to tell, at first we wanted to tell 3 stories, and then Omar sort of fell in front of us, and we couldn't resist, telling the 4th. But I think, we worked with a lot of great organizations who are doing a lot of great work within the responsible fatherhood movement in the city to find our subjects.
Great. Question for Shirley. What kind of challenges did you have in casting your film and working with them? Was there some kind of challenges as far as like you're saying you wanted to create a film where something that you hadn't seen before, like not from a traditional feminist perspective per se, but something that you kind of picked up on.
Yeah, I wanted to make something that our girls can identify with, that they can be proud of their grandmothers, whether even if they're not in the ruling class. So I didn't want to cast someone like in LA. There are a lot of sort of Disney Asian American actors. They have to do what they have to do, but that's not the girl I wanted. Actually, the girl, I've been teaching her since she was 5, so she was my student for a long time. I did little photo shoots with her. She was playing little cameo in my other films. Actually, I showed my other film, Maria Modern, here in 2013, and she was in it. So I was kind of practicing with her. I wanted her in my filming process. I wanted to grow with her. And, that kind of community, growing with the community is very important for me because I want to make the film for the community, not trying to be like Shirley Kim, a tour or something. So in that sense, working with her was so perfect. But challenge, of course, was, the nature of co-production and shooting in South Korea. Yeah.
Okay. How about this is for the Daddy Don't Go team. What were the challenges shooting, and dealing with your subjects?
I think Suzette will agree with me. The hardest thing was keeping tabs on these guys. Alex, at probably the first year we were shooting, lived in 4 different family shelters in New York. And, we had cell phones and numbers, and I probably still have 8 or 9 different numbers for him in my phone. So to try to track them down and months later say what's going on, and I think that sort of came across in the film too, is that you would just get these interviews where we would have downloads of months and months of turmoil and changes, and so to do that 4 different times, with 4 different guys to say, where are you living now? What's your number? Actually, I think Facebook was our best friend because even without a working phone, they could still get Wi-Fi reception at a library or something and could Facebook message us. But yeah, keeping tabs on the guys was probably the most difficult thing.
And what about as far as finding a story within it, being able to weave it together into film?
Yeah.
What were the challenges there?
Yeah, I don't know if we knew exactly what we had in the can until we really started to edit. I think poverty is, I think, the common denominator across the guys. They all struggle financially to provide for their kids, and face really difficult circumstances and tough choices. And I think for us, it's easy to look at these guys and say, it's an easy choice. Don't leave your kid. Don't leave them alone. Or but for them, with no support, with no help, I think it's really difficult to make those judgment calls. And so balancing, I think, these poor choices that you saw that the guys made at times, but also showing those lighthearted, amazing parenting moments that so many of us are familiar with, was difficult for us because we spent almost 2 years editing the film and trying to understand how do you balance the good and the bad with both of these, and hopefully tell a story that's redemptive, I think, in a lot of ways with each of them.
I mean, I think that was pretty successful in the film because that was something that came through that we don't really see often in media. So just to see that it's they have the same challenges as everybody else, but maybe not the same resources, so you can empathize with them. You can't really judge them so much. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
I have a question for Shirley too. Now, as far as the writing process in that case, because obviously yours is scripted. Were there some challenges?
So the challenge of the writing process was getting too many feedback, and this is my thesis film, so it's a lot of people are saying, giving me feedback, but I had to learn how to take the feedback and just make sure to film what I needed, but also write the script so that it has breathing room where you improvise. Because I'm working with non-actors, and most of the boys are non-actors, and so I just wanted that room, when I'm writing, so that I can be on set and watch what's happening rather than trying to Hitchcock everything. This is my vision, So.
Quickly, I was just wondering, there's a tribute to your grandfather?
Yeah, so my grandfather passed away. I couldn't be there because, I had been undocumented, so I couldn't go to Korea. So I have my own story, of immigration, and I couldn't be there for him. He and I were very close, so that's, so this film in some ways is very, very personal.
Okay, well, I'd like to open it up to the audience now. Do you have any questions? Okay, back there.
This is a question for Down You Don't Go filmmakers. I was just curious about how much footage you had, and what was your editing process like? Were you with the editor, or did you do a first cut with yourself, or did the editor do a first pass and then you sat in the room, or how did that all work out?
Yeah, I think we had almost 400 hours of footage by the time we were done shooting. We did a first pass at the majority of, I think, the first half of the film. And then we had an editor come on probably about halfway through shooting to start refining some of the stories. And I think that allowed us to start figuring out how we wanted to tell the rest of their story and what was important to focus on with each of them. And I think some of them were very easy to follow, such as Alex's story. His court case came out of nowhere for us, and easily just became the focus for him. With Roy, we didn't know what we really wanted to say with Roy. We knew that there was complications with his past, his baby's mom, his dad, and so for probably a year we played with, is it talking about his drug dealing past and his ability not to get a job? Is it about Chelsea and what's going on there with her? We actually met Chelsea off camera and wanted desperately to interview her, and then she disappeared immediately after that. And so you just sort of, I think a lot of times the stories tell themselves for us, but we worked closely with our editor for about 1.5 years.
Did you have multiple cameras going on at all times?
The court shoots, we had 2 cameras, but for the majority of the time it was just me and Emily shooting, and at times just me. The Florida shoot with Nelson, I went by myself, and I actually didn't know where they were when I landed. I spent about 24 hours with them, and then flew back to New York. And they moved back 2 days later after that shoot. And then there were shoots we went with Omar back to his mom's place in Cleveland. That it didn't make the film, but I mean there were a lot of challenges, throughout shooting, just because of we had to be available at a drop of a hat, knowing that if they reached out to us and were willing to be on camera, we had to run and find them. So, yeah.
Last question, I'm sorry, but I just need to know, did everybody live happily ever after? It's very important to me. How's Alex and Alex Jr.?
Alex has been in and out of jail since the premiere of the film. I think it's a difficult story to fully understand where he is at the moment. We are in contact with his mom. I know that he has a trial coming up in Philly. He's been in and out and struggling to still try to make it. Roy is doing pretty well. He has a job and he's moved out of his parents' house, and Kate and her living on their own. Nelson and Rebecca got Section 8 housing about 6 months ago, so they have their own apartment in the Bronx. They have a new baby, so they have a fourth. And it sounds like he's going to start a job in about a month or so. Yeah. And then Rebecca's supposed to go to school, but we stopped shooting 2 years ago. So that EMT story that she told never happened.
Yeah, he just recently told me that she's trying to go to school. So, yeah.
I think with a lot of these guys, they have these big dreams and these big hopes, and a plan looks great and it's going to happen, and it never does. Even at our premiere at Doc NYC last November, a woman stood up in the audience and said, "I'll give you a job," and he followed up, and I think these guys chase whatever lead that they have. And then Omar still does not have full custody of Milagros, or full, I think, guardianship of her at the moment. She's still in and out of a mental institution. The boys, he does have custody of, and he still is struggling to get out of family shelter in the Bronx, and still try to. I think no matter what, he will almost never have a job, because I think the struggle to take care of his kids and their mental health issues is too great for him to focus on having a job. So as terrible as that sounds, I think for him it's one small step at a time. And I think for him, he's focused on trying to get Milagros back at this point. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, okay.
This is a question for Danny Dongo. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for shedding light on this issue. It was very uncomfortable for me to watch, because a lot of situations I actually had to go through it in my childhood and watch my parents go through it as well. But my question is, was there any parts of any situations that was kind of uncomfortable to film, or it was like, man, this is too much, let's just cut the cameras off?
I think everyone feels uncomfortable when you see that judge standing in front of Alex. We had no idea that she was going to do that, and if she looks familiar, you've probably seen her on TV. She's on Judge Judy's Hot Bench.
That's what I know.
So she is notorious for her outbursts. But that was pretty uncomfortable to walk into to criminal court in the Bronx. And I think to have all of our eyes kind of opened on the judicial process, particularly in the Bronx. A lot of people don't know, but the Bronx has a 3.5-year backlog on cases. So Alex committed that crime back in 2011, and by the time he was standing in that court, that was 3 years later. So the system right now, we saw it over and over again where people would delay their case or push it or find a reason to adjourn it for another 6 months, and then ultimately they would do what Alex did and take a plea, because they're faced against maybe a he said, she said, kind of situation, and would have to, possibly face a much longer sentence. So that was really uncomfortable. Also, sneaking into some of these family shelters was pretty uncomfortable. Alex's in particular, that you saw where the stove falls apart, that shelter was as bad, I think, as it gets. If there was smell-o-vision, it would be, really, really bad. There was no hot water in that shelter. There was spotty electricity. There were rats everywhere that we could see. And to the city, that's a livable situation for a toddler.
Sound like an abandoned building.
Yeah. But we saw that all over New York, where these guys ended up. We were there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Back.
Is there? Oh, I need to yell. Okay. This is a question about sort of going back to how you structured the piece. Did you think of all of these stories as, did you sort of arc them separately and then edit them, take pieces of them together, or how did you sort of go about, you were telling, I mean, there's certainly themes that are consistent through all 4 stories, but how did you think about each individual arc versus the sort of the larger project?
Actually, our editor edited each of the stories separately, and then we figured out moments where we could start segueing between them. That was particularly challenging because they all started in a different place. We struggled for a long time introducing the guys. How do you introduce them? How do you make the audience remember who's who? You probably saw, we probably had 80 different cuts of the whole film at one point. There was one that was an hour and 40 minutes. This is now 89 minutes. So it ranged drastically, but I wish I had a picture of it, but we had a wall, a pin board, where each of the guys was a different color. And if you looked at the board, there was a different, note card, and we were trying to alternate, as many times as we could, and then still understand, these arcs and these curves that the guys were going through. And that board changed, hundreds of times too. So, I think at some point we realized that the stories were sort of speaking for themselves, and we needed to trim away a lot of the fat that we were, holding on to. And so, we really narrowed it down to what was the most important for each of them.
Can I ask one really, really fast question? Okay. Also, what about access in terms of, you mentioned the shelters, but also the courtrooms, the correctional facility?
so Rikers and the correctional facility and the courts, we all got permission. We spent months petitioning the court to allow us access. I think for the family court footage we saw with Omar, it was the first time that camera crew had been allowed in family court in the Bronx since the 90s. And that was for a news segment, I believe. So it's very rare, but we had a great pro bono attorney that worked with us to allow us access. Same with the criminal court. We petitioned for months to allow us access. And actually, Alex had several court visits before we were allowed in there. So Rikers, as soon as Alex went to Rikers, we asked New York State Correctional Facility to allow us to interview him, and it took about a month. And then Lakeview, the correctional facility, we probably wrote for them for 6 months to allow us to come up and see Alex. And for whatever reason, they changed their mind. They ignored us and told us no, and then for whatever reason, they changed their mind and said we could. And I think that program is actually probably a very interesting one, and a different side of the correctional facility that you don't normally see, but it's for mostly young men who have had substance abuse problems. But the structure of it was very interesting to us because it wasn't what we expected when we showed up. And I think that was maybe a part of why they allowed us access, was they wanted us to show that it wasn't a typical jail. So yeah, and then the shelters, we sort of asked for permission, and other times said we were friends and happened to have a camera in our backpack. So yeah, I think, for us it was just about following the stories, and some of the things we knew we had to do it by the book, and others we knew we could do what we needed to get the footage we wanted.
Yeah, I think it's about the time that we have, so we have to wrap it up. We'll be going into the bar area, so feel free to ask questions to the filmmakers, and thank you again for coming out. Wonderful day of programming, and it's just an honor to have everyone here engaging in a dialogue with the audience. So thanks again. And see you next week. Oh, and yeah, we're just gonna do a raffle real quick. So, oh yeah.